to our distribution list. Let's see, we've got. He's got a good number of people online too. So maybe what we'll start with is just introductions, and then I'll make some introductory remarks, and Ward, our board chair, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I was thinking you might want to make some introductory remarks.
Sure.
And then we'll launch into the program. All right. Oh.
Do you want me to start it? Board start? Board starting.
Well, I've already introduced myself. I'll make my introductory remarks later. So why don't we go to my left and we'll introduce the other people here that are contractors to or participants in our GSA.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Wolf. I'm with Eastside Water District. I'm the general manager for Eastside. Sorry, I guess we have to be very loud to make sure. Can you hear us okay?
Just stand up, Ruth. We've got a big crowd in here.
I'm Sarah Wolf. I'm the general manager for Eastside Water District.
Hey, everybody, I'm Ryan Aston. I'm the rate and fee consultant working for the GSA.
Thank you.
Savannah, do you want to?
Sure. I'm Savannah Chaden. I help with the groundwater accounting platform and rules reg.
And then any board members that we have here or TAC members that we have here, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Dirk Ulrich, Vice Chair for the GSA.
Ward Burroughs here. I know quite a few of you. It's a great turnout. This is all uncomfortable information, you guys, and at least Dirk and I, feel the same way. It's uncomfortable for us too. Tim's real involved. He's on East Side, and he's an alternate for our GSA board as well. But I know with us on the board, it took us a while to get to where we were even comfortable looking at some of this stuff. And we've looked at these numbers, and then the first draft, we said it won't work. And that's what you get when at least you got a couple farmers or some farmers on the GSA board. Of course, East Side is all farmers basically. And so we have quite a bit of influence with East Side in terms of what happens on this GSA board. And that's a real positive. And I think everybody needs to realize that. It's not going to be what everybody wants, okay? But we think this is the best transparent plan, most financially viable for us as the East Turlock subbasin that we could come up with, okay? If the state comes in and takes over, it's going to cost a whole lot more money, and none of that money is going to stay here, okay? And it's really, really important that everybody realizes that in terms of this vote. The votes is coming up. They're going to talk all about that. And I just want to make sure that I thanks everybody for coming and participating and trying to learn what this is going to really do. Okay, thank you.
Any other board members want to make any remarks or any other TAC members? I don't think we have any other TAC members here. Okay. Oh, Dennis, I'm sorry. Yes. Dennis Yotsuya.
Yotsuya, I'm on the back, and I'm alternate on the board, and also with the board as if we're there.
Okay, so why are we here? During our last workshop, it just became apparent to us that we wanted to make another opportunity to answer the question, answer some key questions that people still had and were feeling like they weren't getting the information that they wanted. So the purpose of this workshop is to just focus on those items. We're not going to give you all the background. If you want the background, more further background, we can answer questions, or you can go to turlockgroundwater.com. And there's a link there to our ETS GSA Proposition 218 program. We are recording this workshop, so if you have questions, and for the people online, we'll try up here to repeat your questions so that everybody can hear them. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this workshop and we're going to post it online for folks who couldn't be here. And then we're going to take the presentation after we get your feedback during the workshop, And we're gonna put it in more like a clickable format so that you can easily get to the information that's being presented here. So, this is probably, groundwater sustainability, compliance with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act that was passed by the state in late 2014 is probably, well, not probably, it is one of the biggest business and quality of life issues in this region. So it's important that we get it right. And that's why we're spending extra time reaching out to make sure that you understand what you're either voting for or protesting. If you support it or you want to protest it, we want to make sure that you do it for the right reasons and that you get your questions answered. Why don't we go ahead and we're going to make some other introductory remarks here. So I'm going to provide some background information and speak to some of the key questions that we're trying to answer, just in terms of where's the money going to go, what's it going to support, what happens if the Prop 218 doesn't pass, how does the proposed fee structure work, right? Because we've got these fee categories that are kind of like a PG&E bill, and it may seem a little confusing. It's actually pretty straightforward if you really start to look at it. So how does it work? We're going to explain that a little bit better. And then Savannah's here, and I'll support her in answering questions about the groundwater accounting platform. Key acronyms we're going to leave out. That's for you to have if you have a hard copy of this, or if people pick up a computer version of this later on. A lot of acronyms in this business. And I think we more acronyms. Go ahead. So just a little bit about who we are. So East Turlock Groundwater Sustainability Agency, or East Turlock Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Agency, is a joint power authority that was formed to implement the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. So to develop and implement a groundwater sustainability plan. We have 5 member agencies. And those include East Side Water District, not to be confused with East Turlock Groundwater Sustainability Agency. East Side Water District was around for a lot longer, and it's that blue core of our area there. A lot of our farmers that started farming here about 30 years ago, 20 years ago, East Side Water District was around to help address groundwater sustainability and adequacy at that time. And so we are building on a legacy of work that they started quite a while ago in collaboration with Turlock Irrigation District, which is to our west. And our western boundary and our northern boundary are basically district boundaries with Turlock Irrigation District. Palico Cortez Water District is in red. It's whereas East Side Water District has a lot of bigger growers in it. Palico Cortez has a lot of smaller growers in it. Like East Side Water District, it doesn't have its own surface water supplies, but it helps its farmers get access to surface water supplies when they're available and deal with overall water supply issues. The green strip that you see in the southern part of our sub-basin, go ahead and go back, is Merced Irrigation District, their north side canal service area. It's about 4,000 acres that they deliver to there. And then we have Merced County and Stanislaus County. We don't have any employees. Our work is done either by volunteers or by consultants or contractors that are hired. As general manager, I'm hired as a contractor to do that job. I don't want there to be any confusion about this. This is either local representatives or people hired by local representatives to implement our program. We are not a state agency. We're complying with a state law. Next slide. So the cone of depression, you've heard that that term used, and what it means is that when you draw groundwater down toward a well or toward an area, you get it to flow toward that area, it draws down. And in our area, because our aquifers are highly productive, but they don't get much recharge, that cone of depression has continued to grow. And those blue lines are contours of equal groundwater elevation. So it's like a topographic map. In the middle of that bullseye is where the drawdown is the greatest. Groundwater is about 200 feet below ground level there, where it used to be between about 20 and 50 feet. Near the edges, it goes up toward the top because of the rivers, and it interacts with, the cone of depression interacts with the rivers. And some of our water is seepage. Much of our water is originally seepage from the rivers, or is originally surface water that gets drawn into the subsurface. And then we also, to the north, we have Turlock Lake, we have the Mal and the Hind Canal going through our area, and there's some seepage from those TID facilities, convey water to our west. The inset boxes are what's called hydrographs. So these are different dates over time, and then all of the blue dots are groundwater levels. And the key feature here is that you see them going down to the right. That means as time goes on, the groundwater levels are getting deeper. That's not letting up. And it won't let up until we put more water into the ground and use less water. And in our groundwater sustainability plan for each of the 20 wells that we use to manage ourselves, we set what's called a minimum threshold. That's the red line. That means as a general thing, we don't want to be below that line, but we recognize that before we can implement our projects, we're going to dive down below it. So we have the dashed blue line below it, which is an interim milestone. And all of our interim milestones for 2027 are below our minimum thresholds, which means we got to do something to come back up. So that's what we're trying to fund. We previously had a land-based fee that's sent out by the assessor office per acre, and that funds our monitoring, our compliance, our ability to meet the reporting requirements of the state, and our overall compliance with SGMA, or the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. What this fee will do is pay for projects and management actions. I'll explain more what those are. Next slide.
Where's the biggest depression area there? What area is that?
Okay, go back. So, right, you can kind of see this almost like triangle shape. I mean, that's the overall depression, and in the middle of it, up here is where it's the deepest.
Which area is that in?
It's under East Side Water District.
I know east side, the Cortez area, the Rico area.
No, Cortez Ligo is like right over here. We're kind of on the fringe of it.
Yeah.
Does somebody want to explain what are the best landmarks there? I mean, we're near the county line.
Yeah, so it is close on Looney between Monte Vista and Keys. That's sort of the area.
Okay.
That's the county line, that brown line going through there, so it's, that's just north of our place.
And the issue is that when you get this kind of drawdown, at least so that, the state in their groundwater speak calls it undesirable results. I don't know who came up with that term, but it basically means stuff that can go wrong if your groundwater gets too deep. People's wells can go dry, it's more expensive to pump, the ground can compact and you get subsidence. You can get issues with more water coming in from the river than you want to lose to the groundwater, because the deeper your cone of depression is, the more water you're sucking in from the rivers. And those are some of these undesirable results. Those are the main ones that we're concerned with here. Next slide. So,
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
You have the screen that you're showing has your notes and the like the duplicate PPT slide. Can you just go to full screen?
Oh, okay.
It is, if we switch, I think that might be the case for this.
Oh, okay. Okay. Online we see the both.
Okay, let me see if we can.
Well, that's
fix
better.
that.
That's better.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
So we have two requirements, regulations, or contractual commitments that are driving what we do. The first one is, I mentioned the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, or GFP, that we put together to implement it. And that was originally found to be incomplete in January by the Department of Water Resources. So we updated it to do two things. One is to add specifics regarding our projects and management actions that will turn those groundwater levels around. Because they said, hey, that's really hard to do, and we're not convinced that you've told us how exactly you're going to do it. So we put in there a plan and specific steps and commitments as to how we're going to do that. The second thing is that we put in there a well mitigation program, because they said that, well, if you draw the groundwater level down to interim milestones that go below these minimum thresholds, probably some people's wells are going to dry, and we want to know what you're going to do about it. So we are just getting ready to adopt a plan that explains what we're going to do about it. And the biggest concern there is domestic wells and figuring out, how to mitigate for people's wells going dry, where the reason for the wells going dry is our management of the groundwater, or the chronic groundwater level decline. So I mean, for those of us that own wells like me, sometimes you wake up in the morning and your pump is on the fritz and it's not very much fun. We don't expect to mitigate people for that. But if there's groundwater levels that go down as a result of sustainable groundwater management and overdraft, then the state won't see us mitigate that. The key here is we have to implement our GSP now while we wait for the state to approve it. And we expect to hear back hopefully later this month. We haven't heard any different yet, but we're keeping our fingers crossed. We're going to hear back soon. And we really tried to find a way that would satisfy the state, because if we're found inadequate, then we get put into state intervention. And there's some implications to that we'll talk about later. The second driver is an agreement that we entered into with TID and the West Turlock Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Agency that's called the Water Accounting Framework. And the reason for that framework is that there's a lot of groundwater in our area that has over the years actually seeped from facilities and from water that TID has brought into the area. And we needed to agree as to how we were going to deal with that. The other thing is that TID is a partner that is able to provide surface water to us outside of their district when their obligations to deliver water to their customers is fully met. And that's a huge benefit for us to be able to get that water from them, because the water that we don't pump is the best kind of recharge. It has an immediate effect, and it makes our water supply more secure. So for the first time in that agreement, we can receive up to 35,000 acre feet per year of surface water under what's called the replenishment water program, when availability allows. And that's roughly been between 3 and 4 out of 5 years is between 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5 years is roughly when that water has been available. So long-term average about 25,000 acre feet per year. Yes, sir.
At what cost?
At what cost? Okay, so that's going back to two things. The cost of the replenishment water in the agreement is pegged at $50 per acre foot. And that's what our fee is based on, that we would be purchasing that water on behalf of our constituents. And so part of what the fee pays for is that water. The other thing is that we have transitional water, which is water that is considered in the agreement owned by TID, that we also pay $50 an acre foot to pump. But that money is put into an account and is used to pay for surface water supply and recharge projects in the sub-basin that are in our GSP. So it's not just, going down the drain, it is, money that's gonna be used for some of our surface water supply projects.
For a total of $7 million.
Initially, just about a little bit less because we've already implemented some projects, so it's a little bit under 7 million. And then over time, as we implement projects and we decrease demand, it's expected to go down, or we're projecting that it'll go down.
So we're paying TID $7 million because of canals? It's all.
We're paying them to put money into a fund to correct our deficit. So that's how I'm, other people may talk about it different ways, but we're paying them because we have had the benefit of that surface water via groundwater. We're gonna stop that benefit and we're going to use that money to get more on surface water throughout the sub-basin and deal with our issues.
Well, I think TID inherited the golden goose.
Yeah, I think that in the agreement, we did a dance for a long time. And, we feel like we came to a good settlement that allows us to move forward, which is super important. And when you consider that the alternative is a drawn out water fight that nobody wants, we really feel like we are trying to make the best decisions for our constituents, for you all in terms of overall not.
But the East Turlock subbasin and the West Turlock subbasin are basically the same subbasin.
Correct. And I would say that the agreement allows us to operate as the same subbasin and work on projects that benefit both of us. So this money is going back towards projects that benefit the entire subbasin. East Side Water District or East Side ETS GSA being a significant part of that. And, delivery of water supply is a big portion of how those projects will come together.
I've got a water table in Delhi, it's 20 feet, in a dry year.
Well, and I will say WTS GSA has a lot of projects on the books to focus on those issues as well. And this is all part of that agreement.
So it's a settlement, but it allows us to move forward, and it allows us to move forward with a partner that helps us with projects as opposed to somebody that we're fighting along the way. The agreement also recognizes or formalizes that we need to be serious about decreasing our groundwater demand. This is not all going to happen from new groundwater supplies being brought in. We're going to try to maximize that. That's a no-brainer. But we need to be looking at decreasing our groundwater demand. So, next slide. So here's our sustainability strategy, and I'm going to contrast that with the next slide, which would show the state strategy if we default to state intervention. Our strategy is to decrease groundwater demand and use on the left here. We have a land repurposing program where we're trying to integrate repurposing into working farm operations and provide incentive payments for a variety of different approaches that folks can use to do that. We realize that your operation better than anyone. Not everything's going to work for everyone, but we want to give you a lot of options. And we're looking at incentive payments as an option to help you do that. Things like rotational fallowing of your orchard, cover cropping with beneficial seed mixes, putting in recharge or storage basins that will help you collect and retain water or recharge it, and then or taking orchard swales out of production, those types of things. Rotational fallowing is a program by itself. We will have minimum standards there, but we're not looking there for multiple benefits. We're just looking for something where we can incentivize you, maybe make it easier to make a decision to keep an orchard block out of production for several years before you replant. And that's also with incentive payments. We want it, so that's reducing groundwater demand and use. We want to increase the water supply, and that's through expanded surface water delivery from TID and from MID. And we want to implement groundwater recharge projects. So we're talking with TID and MID also about using their facilities for off-season deliveries to help with recharge. And under our MLRP program, we're also looking at basins and other things where an additional benefit is not just taking land out of production, but increasing recharge. We want to maintain local control, and that's through operating in a way that checks the boxes for DWR in terms of what we're required to provide to avoid state intervention, and to demonstrate that we're doing it. So there's already a fee for that, but these two items on the left here is what we're trying to fund now. And what we're trying to do is really start a course that has the least economic impact on the region and on you. With the option being, if this doesn't pass, next slide. One of the things that could happen is state intervention. And if the state intervenes, they're going to be focused on reducing groundwater demand because that's what's easiest for them to do. And they've said as much. So there'd be mandatory metering and reporting, mandatory pumping limits. They would not be interested in increasing the water supply because that's not easy for them to do. Groundwater recharge, they wouldn't likely consider either. We can still do it if we want to. If they would encourage us, they would give us an attaboy, but their requirements would not include that. And then maintaining local control would be gone. So that's their objective as opposed to ours. You can flip back to the previous. Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah, when you explained there as far as these different things you plan on doing, that was determined by the fees that you're charging for overuse of water. Is that what's going to pay for those, or what's actually paying for them?
So we'll get into that in a little bit. I'm just trying to answer some of the big picture questions right now, but there's four different fee categories. One of them is a free category. Two of them are for water that under our plan that you're allowed, that would be compliant with the plan. And then the highest fee category would be if you're pumping more than the plan allows. But our budget is based on assuming that pumping doesn't occur. So our budget is based on the first two categories, and the third category, Ryan will say this again, but it bears mentioning more than once. That third and highest category is for additional expenses to help you to pump less than our target amounts. So that highest fee category, where we would use that money for additional programs, for additional projects that decrease the water demand and that address any adverse impacts that come from overpumping. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So next slide. So let me back up a second. If the Prop 218 doesn't pass, we wouldn't right away say, okay, state, come in and take over. We have an additional tool in our toolbox, and that's consistent with that category 3 pumping, that if you pump more than we want you to pump in the plan, we hit you with a penalty, and we use that penalty to fund our activities. But it would be, in a lot of ways, more hands-off. We wouldn't have those incentive payments anymore, probably wouldn't have those incentive payments. People would have to figure it out on their own. So we think ultimately that will be more expensive because it'll be more kind of willy-nilly, who's able to keep land in production, who takes it out of production, as opposed to us providing an incentive where it's done in a way that's planned and where you choose the alternatives and you have more alternatives than just walking away.
Can I just say,
yes.
maybe say it a little differently? If this fee does not pass, the support programs that we're trying to provide you to make this transition will not be there. So it will be land fallowing that don't have financial support to back them up.
Because this room is so big, it's really important to stand up because you can't hear all the way in the back. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just repeat it one more time. So if the assessment fee does not pass, what the GSA will have to resort to is a fee that pays for the the GSA and activities like the accounting agreement that we have to execute, but it will not pay for support programs that are offered through this. So if you have to fallow land, we're trying to provide you programs with financial assistance to get you through that. Those programs will not be able to be funded. So I just wanted to state it a little differently.
Yeah, that's actually better stated. Yes, sir.
How long until we project that the school program start paying back to the farmers? So that way we know that the money that we're investing up front is gonna be useful. You know what I mean? Like, so let's say we go through and we dump $20 million into programs and trying to stop the water from falling so fast. How long until we know that that money is being useful and not wasted?
So there's two answers to that question. The first is how quickly, so the question was, how long is it till we start implementing programs and start seeing results and making sure that the money is actually going to a use that makes sense and that solves the problem and is not being wasted? Did I?
No, yeah, 100%. You know, we put a lot of money into this, and then all of a sudden we start seeing that it's not changing the levels of our groundwater because they're affected by other variables. Then, like, how do we know, like, hey, at that point in time, it's not us?
Yeah, so there are two answers to the question. The first is that we have an open call for project concepts where we're asking people to submit their projects so we can start getting them in the pipeline and working with people to develop them. We are actively working with TID to start to expand side gate deliveries for replenishment water. And we're talking about a pipeline project that would take water to the middle of our Kona Depression. So the timeline for it is there's some things that are happening now, and we'll be selecting a couple of projects under our MLRP program as pilot projects that we expect to start on this summer. And then we expect our other projects, and if the Prop 218 passes, we expect to start funding our other projects starting in the latter part of the year. See, there was something else important I was going to say. Well, I'll get back to it. The second thing is that we monitor about 40 wells throughout East Turlock Subbasin. 20 of them are compliance points. The other 20 help us to get more perspective on what's going on. We monitor those twice a year, and they also have electronic pressure sensors in them so that we can see what's happening in the in-between times. It helps us interpret the data. So that ultimately is what tells us and tells the DWR whether we're complying. We collect that data twice a year. We are looking at a groundwater turnaround that we'd like to see, especially in our critical areas, somewhere around 2027, 2028. We want to bounce back to 2015 levels by 2032. So we're going to get data on an ongoing basis to see if things are turning around, and we should know within a few years how effective what we're doing is. If it's more effective than we think, then we know we can scale back a little bit. If it's not effective enough, then we know where the areas are that we need to focus.
What if it's not effective at all? And I say that because when you look at the drop in groundwater, it started before we started farming on the east side, you know? So farming big. So like what happens if it doesn't stop it? Yeah, or do we just keep pushing into it? Do we keep pushing?
If we're not making.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be rude. I just want to make
It's
sure.
fair. I'll just state that if we are not making progress and improving the basin, DWR is going to demand more aggressive action on our behalf. And that means taking more land out of production faster. So it will not be a decision that we make. We will, in all likelihood, be told by the Department of Water Resources what we have to do.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of work has gone into estimating how much we need to, how much recharge we need and how much we need to decrease our pumping. And we're proceeding with the best information that we have available right now, which tells us that net decrease is we're pumping about 250,000 acre feet per year, and we need a net decrease of about 97,000 acre feet per year. We're hoping to get as much of that out of recharge and surface water delivery as possible, but the rest of it, probably more than half of it's going to have to be made up from decreasing pumping. And we'll implement that in five-year steps. So if there is state intervention, the key walkaway is that we're still responsible to comply with SGMA and to fix any deficiencies in our plan that they allege that we have. And state intervention results in additional cost to our ongoing costs. So we can tell you categorically it's going to be more expensive. So our ongoing costs are to implement the GSP, monitoring and reporting, basic compliance, whatever project and management actions we do decide to implement in our GSA operation. And the additional costs are well registration, extraction fees, penalties if we pump over our preset pumping limits, corrective actions and reporting, and mandatory pumping limits, which may or may not consider all the input that we're trying to gather now. And the key there is, and Ward alluded to it before, that the fees and penalties collected by the state, they're not obligated to use them for projects inside our basin. They could. But historically, the State Water Resources Control Board, when they collect penalties, they put it into a fund and they apply it where they think it's needed throughout the state. So that's something that our legislators, some of them have pushed back and said, no, you really ought to use it where it's coming from. Hopefully that'll pass someday, but right now there's just a huge risk that we have additional expenses that still leave us in the hole with obligations to fill. Next slide. So how are we planning to fund this? Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah, then, like he was talking about, is if he's going this way down here, or even if he's not, will there be a moratorium put on wells, new wells?
So the question was, if things keep going bad, will there be a moratorium on new wells? The GSA does not put a moratorium on wells. Well permitting is conducted by the counties. Each of our two counties, Merced and Stanislaus, have a groundwater ordinance. And currently, in fact, I think virtually all of the wells that we see in our area are replacement wells. Or their equivalent, like somebody subdividing.
All the new wells, the only new wells that are going in are
those are the only new ones, yes. It is possible to put in a new well in both counties, but the ask is pretty high in terms of the studies that you need to do in order to prove that your well is sustainable. And they will not put in a well unless we can tell them that based on what we see, that well is sustainable. So I would say it's possible, especially in areas where there's not much groundwater development. But I can tell you that the ask is high. It's expensive to do the studies that are needed for that, but it is possible to do it.
That'd be just replacement wells then.
Yeah, just replacement wells are the ones that we're aware of at this point. That and domestic and small stock wells. Tim?
Essentially, if you did get a new well put in, you would have to be at a sustainable level, which would be at 6 inches to a foot only per acre that you could apply.
It would be less. I mean, we can't on the one hand say we need to cut back our pumping and then allow new wells that increase the groundwater demand at the same time. That would not be consistent with our plan. But I can tell you that in other similar areas, I'm thinking of an example here where there was a new ranch that was developed their own groundwater supply in Stanislaus County. But what they did was they only developed a fraction of their 640 acre section. And they had to prove that the demand from that fraction was at a sustainable level. And they were able to do it. And they got a sweet deal on their lease. So, it worked for them. And now if almond prices ever come back, they're going to be in good shape. Yeah. Yes, let's move on. So there's two different fee categories that we're using to pay for this. On the right side, the general compliance administration and management, we have our SGMA operational assessment that's in place. you are getting, county assessors bills yearly for that at either the irrigated or non-irrigated rate for your parcel. On the left is, we want to fund our project and management actions. That's what we're talking about today. And that's our proposed groundwater use fee. But we are also, for items where we're working together with West Turlock Subbasin, we have a cost share agreement with them where we pay just a little bit less than 50%. They pay just a little bit more on our overall compliance as part of the whole subbasin. And then we are actively looking for grants. These are grants that we've all paid for, and we want to act smartly to bring as much of that money back into our subbasin as possible to the extent that it can make a difference for us.
I'm sure that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, so next I want to talk in a little more detail about these proposed fees, about what they will pay for if they pass. And then we'll dig into the fee structure and some of the specifics surrounding that. We also have on the table here a demonstration of the fee calculator at the end too. So that should really kind of dot the i's, cross the t's as far as making sure everybody has a chance to see how this breaks down specifically. So everything in this table, these 5 programs are what the proposed fee would pay for. Mike has referenced these already so far, but we wanted to give a little more detail. And then notice on the left, we have a blue arrow and a green arrow. So some of these things are intended to increase surface water supply, and some are intended to reduce groundwater demand, and there's one that does a little bit of both. The first one on there is replenishment water. So this refers to the up to 35,000 acre feet a year, or a long-term average of about 25,000 acre feet a year of surface water that has not historically been available, that would be available through the accounting agreement with TID. And that's something that these fees would support. And that increases from what's been about 5,000 acre feet a year. So it's a big increase from what has historically been available. The second one on there is transitional water. And that is also a part of that accounting agreement with TID. But this refers to water that has seeped from TID facilities into the groundwater basin. And as Mike noted earlier, that money will be put into a fund that is used to support projects to build out the infrastructure that can allow an increase of surface water supply into the subbasin. So those two are sort of related in a sense, but they are 2 different things, and they're both things that stem from that accounting agreement with TID.
Where you're saying TID is gonna provide funds to extend pipelines from their, say, the Highline?
So that money paid to TID will be used at least in part for projects that I think the infrastructure projects that increase surface water access in the subbasin, yes.
So let me maybe chime in here, and you can chime in too, Sarah. So the specific projects that'll be funded by those funded, that is going to be determined as we go along. It is in the agreement that they have to be projects that are in the GSP for sustainability. And some of the main projects are those infrastructure projects that we're talking about. So we're working with them right now. You know, we'll stay tuned for what exactly gets funded. But those projects should be eligible.
So what you're saying is if I could get TID to run me a pipeline from the Highline Canal to my place, which isn't that far, they're gonna subsidize that somehow?
I would say that the first step is TID has agreed to allow you to have a side gate, which was not permissible before. So you could put in a side gate if you wanted to at this point, run a pipeline to your property and receive replenishment water when it's available. That was not available 6 months ago. There are programs in place, some funded by Eastside Water District, soon to be funded by the GSA, that will help fund that infrastructure as well. So some of that money, the money that was going to TID as payment for the transitional water, is in a fund that is yet to be determined how that will be spent. I don't think it will be spent on something that goes specifically to your property, but it might be spent on something that is a larger side gate the entire GSA benefits from. But there will be funds that come from that $7 million we're paying a year to help fund projects on both sides, WTS GSA and ETS GSA. So I can't say that specifically it's going to your property, but it's going to benefit the GSA.
If I'm using TID water instead of groundwater, I'm helping out the subbasin.
If you're in TID and you choose to use your TID water instead of groundwater, you're absolutely helping out the subbasin.
But
We don't have any
TID
jurisdiction.
If you're actually in TID, you're not in this subbasin.
Correct, but you just
So-
said if you're if you're going to use replenishment water that TID provides to ETS GSA, you are absolutely helping the subbasin.
You're gonna pay for that water.
But I'm gonna pay for that water, I know that. But
You
to put in the infrastructure.
The
is that what that
GSA is
$7 million
intending,
being used for?
GSA is intending to help you put in that infrastructure with the fees that we're collecting.
Well, that kind of answers some of it, but how much of it?
That is being determined, and you can be a part of those decisions.
What Eastside Water's done is provide around 50% of the projects that we've helped support in the last 2 years, 3 years,
2 years.
okay? Anybody in the room that was supported by Eastside? Yeah, you here? Nobody here?
That's what?
Public Cortez.
That they got water, they got put projects in so they could take TID replenishment water in the last year or in the year before.
Okay, well, that was at $50 an acre foot.
Sure, but
Okay,
the
but
infrastructure,
Who,
wait a minute, the infrastructure that they had to put in,
right,
East Side put up the money to help, put up about half of it.
but when you get that water,
Yeah,
who are you getting it from? Are you getting it from from the
TID.
sub-basin, or are we getting it from TID?
Getting it from TID. In Eastside Water District's case, we have paid for the water as well.
Because I was talking to another grower, and he said, well, and he has a side gate, but he says, won't do me any good because East Side's gonna charge him these rates that, we're talking for pumping groundwater.
So our fee is based on the assumption that the GSA pays for that replenishment water and TID delivers it to you. So we pay them as part of the fee that we're collecting throughout the subbasin.
So you're billing me then, not TID.
You're being billed for the groundwater that you use.
But what about the water I get from TID?
The water that you get from TID, we pay for.
Just as we've done in Eastside Water District. That is how it's currently contemplated in this fee assessment.
Like I have 100 acres, above 100 acres on the canal.
Yeah.
And with a side gate, so last year I didn't use any well water at all. Whatever.
Sure.
I mean, I paid for it, yes, I don't know, I could check, see where the bill came.
I heard somebody say we need to stand up. Hold on one second, let me just answer. Eastside Water District has paid for replenishment water for Eastside landowners for the last 2 years and prior, and we continue to send out notices that if you took water from TID, you can send us your bill, we will pay it. We've done that for a number of landowners. It's still an opportunity that you can participate in, so I encourage you to do that. In this fee assessment, it is contemplated that the GSA will pay for ongoing replenishment water, the $50. That may or may not be the case. The rules have not been set up, but that is how we've contemplated it at this point in time. And so that's how the fee is built. And then I think we had a question in the back.
Yeah, on this, so you said that TID is gonna pay for some of this infrastructure, but then 218 is funding some of this infrastructure too, right? And then some of these fees are going to that as well. And I think probably some people probably wondering like, okay, maybe getting water in certain areas, how is that gonna help me? And so maybe you can kind of explain that and tell them how it's gonna benefit everybody.
Yeah, I would say that as a GSA as a whole, we are overdrafted a lot. And everybody is going to continue to be limited on how much they can pump unless we put in these projects and we move surface water. And so when we bring replenishment water in to the area, to ETS GSA, that is to benefit everybody. It may not be going to your parcel, but it's increasing the groundwater table. And we are hoping that it is allowing you to continue to pump at a level that is sustainable. So you may be receiving replenishment water because you're close to the high line, but you're benefiting the entire basin by not turning on your well and pumping. It's increasing our numbers overall for everybody. Is that what you were alluding to?
I think that there's a,
People as far as how it's coming from TID, east side, fees, all those are going into help with this infrastructure, is that correct?
so the transitional water payments that go to TID, the $50 an acre foot that go into the fund that's gonna pay for sustainability projects throughout the subbasin. And we can't tell you specifically what projects, other than that we expect the projects that are in the GSP to be funded. In the background, there's a common sense expectation that if we're paying 7 million, that we expect value out of that 7 million to come back to us, or there's no reason for us to keep paying it. Okay, so I can't tell you, a bottom line on exactly what projects that's gonna pay for, but it's gonna pay for infrastructure that will make water delivery throughout the subbasin for recharge, and in place of using groundwater, more available. That's gonna be the focus of that money. And some of those projects will probably be in WTS GSA, and some of them will be in ETS GSA. But it's our expectation that especially the big infrastructure projects will be part of that mix. I just can't tell you that it was in the agreement that way. We're just not at that point yet with the agreement. We need to keep working that process and identifying and building out those, developing those projects.
The other districts, they have their own fees like you do in east side.
We are all paying an assessment now in the GSA as a whole. Everybody is paying. Eastside Water District has been collecting for a number of years prior to the rest of you that are outside of Eastside Water District. But now everybody is collecting at a same rate. And this fee for your use of groundwater will be equal across the entire GSA. Everybody will be paying equally into this fund to pay for these projects and to improve the situation. So consequently, everybody has to get a benefit from this fee that we're collecting. So back to my point of, you may be getting surface water delivered to your property, but as much as the universal fees are being utilized to pay for that, everybody in the entire GSA will benefit from that. And the benefit is by increasing the amount of groundwater you can pump over the long term.
So, not to beat a dead horse here, I apologize, but so the people that are receiving the groundwater now and they're paying for it, right? Because if we do get extra water, replenishment water, you still pay for it. Will they pay for it as well as pay for, like, you know what I mean? Like they're paying for that water now. Is that water now owned by you guys? Since you guys are paying TID for replenishment water and that's all the water they're gonna send now? Or because, that kind of like defeats the purpose of some of these guys that bought property next to a canal for a reason, right? And for that, and so now their replenishment water that they get, that they paid for years, is now gonna get divvied up across a whole bunch of people. It kind of sounds like, is that kind of how we're moving to?
We're not moving necessarily to that, but that is a decision that is going to be made as we work through the rules and regulations. We've never had a groundwater credit program or a pumping regulation in place before. So if you were using surface water, it was benefiting your property, but there was nothing generating a groundwater credit or any kind of balance or imbalance by using it. So now we're in a different phase where we are tracking what everybody uses. And so the benefit will be there to everyone, but those that have historically or maybe are adjacent to the Highline Canal, we need to figure out a balance of how they benefit from that slightly differently because they've historically taken it and paid for it. And so there could be a leave behind at a certain percentage that they get a benefit from that. We don't know what that is yet. That is something we have to develop, and we have an ad hoc committee It's made up of growers that we meet every other week and we talk about these things and we would encourage all of you to participate in that. It's really an important question that isn't answered at this point in time. Yes.
So I pay my TID utilities for pumping my groundwater out of the ground. Is this new $50 acre foot fee gonna include my pump that I have to put in to get surface water? Or am I gonna have to pay the electricity and the $50 acre foot fee?
You will have to pay electricity and the pumping fee that Ryan's about to lay out.
So if I conform to taking the surface water, I'm paying probably double or triple what I normally.
No.
Why not? If I have to buy the water that I normally take out of the ground.
You are going to be assessed if this assessment passes for using groundwater in the basin at all. That's separate from your PG&E usage.
I don't have to.
I mean, your TID, sorry, your TID power usage. As all landowners have, whether they're paying PG&E or TID, they've been utilizing an energy source to pump that groundwater.
Right.
They've been paying those bills. They also will now have an assessment for the use of that groundwater that comes to the GSA that is separate and different from, so I'm looking at Tim in front of you. He's paying his power bill and his assessment. You also are going to be paying your power bill and your assessment.
But then if I have to I'm on the canal, but I've not been allowed to take the surface water. So now I'm gonna have to put out money to put in the side gate and use that water and then pump it from there to the point I need it to be. It's gonna cost exponentially more money to farm than it has in the past.
You will be able to continue to use your groundwater if that's what you choose to do.
I'm willing to reduce my use of groundwater, but it's gonna cost me way more.
I know Tim wants to say
Yeah,
something.
well, if you're in TID, or if you're in, East Side Water District,
Any side water.
we could help with the, putting your pump in and the side gate and all those things.
Okay,
And in the
that's
future,
great, but what about my bill?
Well, your bill will be a third less, or 2/3. I mean, it'll go from, if you're pumping surface water compared to 160 feet deep.
Right.
Your bill will be a third of what it was.
Oh.
No, it will be. That's just the way it looks. So you can, either we'll pay in the future, maybe 100%, 50%, we don't know, right? And then your electrical bill will be greatly different.
Yeah, because it's massive, right?
Well, it'll be 2/3 less.
Promise, promise.
We're gonna take one more question because we do want to get to the rate structure.
Are the cities and towns in this valley also involved?
Most of the communities in this particular subbasin are on the WTS side. And they have been, for a number of years, been undergoing a lot of infrastructure improvements to provide surface water. I know Ceres has completely, but has switched over to surface water. So they are as well coming off of their groundwater use, just like we are. They're
Is there
making-
any recharging by forcing water into the ground as proposed?
We have been experimenting with a lot of different recharge opportunities. There's a lot of landowners that are already recharging in the basin. Eastside Water Districts has purchased a piece of property. We've installed a very large recharge pond where we're going to have a side gate and be bringing water next year. Hopefully there's replenishment water into recharge there. And we hope to expand those, but yes, there
And
is.
you have the whole interface of canals and wells that could be reversed. And just clean the water up and dump it in. You can really charge it up quick.
We've done a little bit of not reversing wells, but in Eastside Water District where we have some dry wells that we have had for a number of years, and they have some challenges of operating them that we're working through that hopefully we can figure out some better solutions so you as landowners can do some of those activities.
And as a sub-basin, we're working with TID and WTS GSA to implement various different kinds of recharge projects as well. And talking about using their infrastructure to deliver wet season water specifically for recharge.
A question.
it's harder than hell to make these payments that you're requiring us to have to pay, which is extortion. As far as I'm concerned, because we're on well water, we don't have no pipe, no canals or nothing around. And what happens if you don't pay, if you're not able to pay this extortion that you're putting in, what happens when we don't pay it?
So if there's a non-payment, then the current remedy that we're talking about is putting it on the assessor's tax bill for next time around. We definitely want to work with our constituents to make sure that, number one, that you have every opportunity that you can to reduce that payment and to help you understand exactly what it is that's needed.
Yes, I understand you're trying to break the farmers. And this is what the hell is gonna happen. You're gonna break the farmers and they won't be able to produce or be able to pay their bills. And we've worked all of our life for our income and for our retirements and everything else there is. And you're gonna put it on our taxes, so then they're gonna come along and they're gonna sell our place, take it away from us. And the majority of these people in here, they live on these ranches and they're gonna be kicked out of their house. They're gonna be homeless.
I understand.
This is ridiculous. This is extortion. You
So-
people need to stop this kind of stuff.
We didn't pass the law, sir. I don't know who you are.
I don't give a damn if you.
Wait. The state passed this law and
Well, then we
mandated
need to
it. You
stop the
go
state.
talk to your state congressman and state senator and get the thing changed. We didn't do that at this level.
Well,
They
then
forced
you
this
start
down
on
our
everybody
throat.
needs to start on it.
But don't take it out on us because we're trying to solve the problem.
Yeah, it's taking our money,
We
taking our
do
ranches
have a
from us,
problem in this area.
taking our house, and we'll be homeless like the people in Turlock on the streets.
Go ahead.
This whole thing is the state, backed by the state, so you didn't want us to go with this thing, but we are with this state.
Nobody likes it. Nobody likes it.
Nobody
No,
likes it.
this is serious business. And the comment is lost on me. I probably can't tell you anything that will satisfy you, sir, and I'm very sorry. I wish I
The
could.
next year you talk like $200, and the following year maybe $300. We can't do it.
Well, I think what we're trying to do, and it's important for us to hear what you have to say, but we also want to talk about, specifically, folks have questions about the fee and how it's going to work. But I do want to say that, and it's not because it's convenient to point at the state, but there's a law that we have to comply with. We don't have a choice. And the purpose of our particular agency is to implement that law in the way that prevents as much of that pain that you're talking about as possible. So that's what we're trying to do. And if I was instead spending my time lobbying, I would not be getting done what I think is the best way to implement that hurts the least people possible and allows agriculture to continue. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't, as the GSA, have a voice where we weigh in on what we think about this. But for us to have our own, rebellion is not gonna work.
It's not gonna do me one bit of good. I'm on PG&E pumps. I don't have no canal. I don't have no river to pump out of.
Well, that's where, that if we can help you on and this is notwithstanding what you said, but if we can help you figure out how to implement projects, how to pay for retention basins from stormwater, how to get water, surface water, if it's available to get it near your property, we will do that 7 ways till Sunday, okay? But what we can't do is take our foot off of the accelerator to turning around those groundwater levels, because if we do that, then the state has said they will come in and they will tell us what to do. Now, nobody knows exactly what that's gonna look like yet, okay? But it's a huge risk. And in our opinion, it's a bigger risk than not doing, not complying with the law.
Well, they need to build up dams and they need to put other dams in. And then stop this running the water down the river for the fish.
We agree. We agree.
I can't build those dams, so unfortunately here today, it's important what you're saying, but here today, we're not able to help you with that.
What are you gonna do with, what is TID gonna do with, $7 million out of a $10 million budget? That is a very poor budget.
So the way that I would look at the money that's going into transitional and replenishment water is those are payments to service an agreement with TID so that we have them able to deliver the replenishment water and able to help us with
But
projects.
that's not gonna help us. We don't get anything. 218 is, they just updated 218 for 2025. It says you have to receive a service. Water, sewage are, we are not receiving anything for it. So how do you condone this by taking money away from us, giving it to TID, paying their water bill, and we still have to pay ours through electricity?
So we are planning to implement projects that will make that water more broadly available throughout the basin. 35,000 acre feet is not going to be enough to supply the whole basin, but we are planning to put in a pipeline project that will circulate more water to areas where it's not currently accessible. So what I would say is that if separately, from this discussion, and I recognize that you're mad as hell about it, and I get that. I'm not trying to take away from that, but I would be interested in talking with you offline, understanding your situation and seeing what kinds of projects might be available and actions that we can incentivize that will help you. And it might not be enough, but hopefully it would be. So with that said, yeah, let's move on because we need to cover some of the basics.
So picking up right where we left off, the middle of this table is the multi-benefit land repurposing program, or MLRP. And notice on the left, it has a little bit of the blue and a little bit of the green arrows because this is a multifaceted program. It could contribute to both surface water supply increase and a reduction in groundwater demand. So under this program, owners would be given incentive payments to adopt practices that reduce groundwater demand, such as taking land out of production. It could also involve things like recharge basins, floodplain reconnection, things of that nature that could increase surface water supply or increase groundwater supply. So that is one of kind of the primary tools I think that the folks will have to adapt to these changes, is the incentive payments available through that program. The next one down is rotational land fallowing. In a way, it's sort of similar to one aspect of MLRP, but it's a bit more stripped down and simple. It's incentive payments provided to landowners to participate in taking land out of production temporarily on a rotational basis. So that, of course, would contribute to a reduction in groundwater demand.
Can you take it out permanently? Will they pay you to permanently take out property?
I think the timelines there are still being worked on, but I think there will be some long-term ability opportunities.
So what we're talking right now is entering into contracts for between 3 and 10 years, depending on what it is that you want to do. But anything that makes sense, we're willing to entertain and talk about.
I think in the last meeting you talked about possibly paying around $750 an acre to fallow.
Yeah, it would be fallowing with a beneficial cover crop. We would pay, I think it's $730 an acre a year.
I mean, there's some people like down here that out of the property, you'd be better off just to fallow permanently. Collect $730 an acre and forget about farming.
Yeah, and wait for almonds to come back.
Yeah, fallow. We can't fallow.
You get $730.
And you still have a bill though. That doesn't wipe out your bill.
Oh, you won't have it.
You get that money.
They still pay a bill?
You still have to pay the bill.
They pay?
So there's an assessment per acre for our operations, and we're proposing, what's being discussed today is a fee per acre foot of groundwater pump. Those are basics, but they would pay for incentives that come back, and different practices pay more or less depending, and they're based on USDA EQIP program rates per acre per year. That's what we're envisioning.
No.
Hasn't been, yes.
They're saying they're still gonna have to pay fees. If they fallow, there'll be no ET generated on that property, right?
Correct.
Right, so if they fallow, they will not have to pay.
Something dollars an acre feet, and that's it.
You're not paying per acre foot, because you're not pumping it.
No, you would be paying no per acre foot fee if you found it.
You'll,
Yes, there would be no fee on
But
that.
that still leaves you the other ground that you don't foul and you have to pay on.
Yes,
You're not
ground-
gonna buy with nothing, you're still gonna have to pay a fee.
yes. The idea is that if you take some of that, and Ryan has a slide a little bit later, so I'll let him move on. But the idea is that, let's say that you take a certain amount of land, you rotate it out of production so that you stay out of that highest fee category and pay less. And you can rotate that around from one block to the next, or what we can do is we can set up like an area where you collaborate with your neighbors and always have a certain amount that's taken out. And we pay per acre per year, or what we do, if you want to do it on your own and you don't want to be paid for it, then you retain your allocation for that land that you're not irrigating, and you apply that allocation to the land that you are irrigating. So Ryan's going to talk about that a little bit further.
And we do plan to show the fee calculator later that may help kind of folks understand exactly how that might work. Moving along here, the last one in this table is well mitigation. This doesn't really relate directly to increased surface water supply or a reduction in groundwater demand. This is really kind of responding to declining groundwater levels. So that's a program that will implement protective measures to avoid adverse impacts to wells from declining groundwater levels. This next slide is a map of potential water supply projects. As Mike stated, we're still kind of in the early phases of this. Notice that the pink and the green there are areas where we have currently some amount of surface water delivery. The blue shading is what we're looking at in terms of a potential expansion of that water being available. Mike, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, you'll notice the blue shading has a fuzzy edge. That's because the extent of that depends on how much sense it makes to pay for the infrastructure to take the water at increasing distances from the canal. May make sense to take it further. In some cases, it may not make sense to take it that far, but it illustrates that we're wanting to expand the delivery through putting in a pipeline here to the Mustang Creek Flood Control Basin, using Sand Creek as a conveyance, using Mustang Creek as a conveyance, and expanding all around near where the canals are until we get up to 35,000 acre feet. And we'll be asking for more, but that's what's been guaranteed to us in up to 35,000 acre feet when it's available, have long-term average of 25. Down here in the Northside Canal Service area, we're also working with MID to expand that. We haven't talked to them specifically about how big that shaded halo will be there, but there will be one. We'll use Dry Creek as a conveyance to bring water to properties along either side of Dry Creek. And if you're located along Dry Creek and we haven't talked to you yet, we want to talk to you about project opportunities, because we have a group that's forming that's talking about how to maximize that water that we get from MID and use Dry Creek for doing it, and also use Dry Creek for using it. So we've got a lot of plans. It's early days, but you can expect to see substantial continued progress on that starting this year and over the next, say, roughly 3 years or so. I expect you're pretty much going to see this extent.
So next I want to talk in a little more detail about the fee structure itself. We've talked kind of about the purpose, kind of the way we're trying to do this, and a little bit about what we're funding. I want to get into some more details about the different elements of the fee structure. First, I want to note that for most groundwater users in the subbasin and in East Turlock GSA, irrigated fields within the GSA, groundwater use will be calculated using evapotranspiration measurements. So what these are, and this is not the same as applied water use, is these use a combination of satellite data and on-field stations to calculate consumed groundwater use, the amount of groundwater consumed by crops. So this is different than what's being put on the fields, the amount that the crop is consuming. So our numbers are going to be different than, say, what a metered well is telling you. It's going to consume water is going to be less than the applied water. Also wanted to note that for non-agricultural groundwater users that exceed the minimum use, we have dairy, poultry, food processing operations. Those users will be required to self-report, and we will calculate the fees in that manner. There will also be an appeals process for those that want to submit meter data. That data would then have to be sort of calculated out and determine what the consumed amount from that data is. But that will be an option for those that are interested in that as well. So moving on to the fee structure categories that we're proposing here. As Mike noted earlier, we have 4 different categories. Starting with category 0, this is groundwater use within the estimated maintenance sustainable yield. This is that free category, as Mike referred to earlier. So no charge is associated with that category. Category 1, just above it in the light blue, is groundwater use within the intended long-term additional sustainable yield once sustainable thresholds are met. Going up to the slightly darker blue, category 2, this is groundwater use above the estimated sustainable yield. And lastly, category 3 is groundwater use above the use reduction target. So that use reduction target harkens back to the GSP and the demand reduction framework that's within the GSP. And that's something, again, that the state is looking at the GSA to implement. So essentially, these proposed fee categories are used to identify the cost of service tied to the amount of groundwater consumed in acre feet per acre.
Yeah, I had a question. So based off these categories like 0, 1, 2, 3, what is the actual numbers? And is that based off each?
It is based on ET, and I have the numbers in a couple slides here. I'm gonna have, no, it's okay. I'm gonna have the numbers to show you that. But essentially the concept here is that the more groundwater used per acre, the higher level of service required to mitigate that groundwater use and achieve balance in the subbasin. So that's why we have these kind of marked up into different categories here. So essentially what we've done is taken the budget and we've allocated portions of the budget to these different categories. So as I mentioned before, category 0 is assigned no costs. So essentially no service is attributed to that first category. And as Mike mentioned earlier, categories 1 and 2 are attributed the entire projected budget. So we've taken everything that we think the plan will cost and we've put it into categories 1 and 2. Category 3 is a bit different. Category 3 is assigned additional costs that would be required to address pumping in excess of the reduction target. So this is, you can look at this as additional service required to mitigate over pumping. A little bit more detail about category 3. So again, this is the cost of mitigating pumping over the demand reduction target. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wondering, what point in time are you gonna do the ET calculations, and adjust accordingly the fees? Is there a certain time that this ET will be calculated? Or how does that work? And then you said that people tap into different sources, that some of the environmental fees and everything are already taken care of, is that correct?
So our reporting period for our fee is November 1st through October 30th. And we've selected that because that pretty much captures your typical irrigation season. And during the early days of that, as you're going through winter, you have precipitation, right? So we count the precipitation as a deposit in your account, the effective precipitation. And then once you start seeing the ET ramp up, those are withdrawals from the account, and it gets reported to us monthly, roughly 30 days after the month ends. And then the accounting is through the end of October 31st. So that's when you'll know what the total is that is owed in any given year. What we're planning to do, if this passes, is to go ahead and split the bill into 2 pieces and have one piece that we send early and another piece that we send after the end of the irrigation season. So, that's not cast in stone yet, but, that'll be, practical implementation planning that we'll do in consultation with the board and at their direction.
Thanks,
Sorry to jump.
Yeah, just briefly, if you could go back. So again, category 3 is assigned the cost of mitigating pumping over that demand reduction target. So essentially, we're looking at the cost of some additional land fallowing, additional well mitigation efforts, and additional transitional water payments based on pumping over that reduction target. So that's how the rate is calculated for category 3. It's calculated differently than categories 1 and 2.
So let me maybe say, our budget is based on categories 1 and 2, because that's what our plan says we will do, okay? Now, we know that not everybody's going to meet that target, or at least not meet it right away. So that's why we have a higher fee associated with category 3 to serve as an incentive to pump less, and then using those funds to help people get down below that category 3 so they don't have to pay it. Okay, so we don't need that category 3 in order to make our plan if we meet our reduction targets. It's when we don't meet our reduction targets that we're going to need the extra money in order to get there.
So this next slide gives you kind of a visual picture of the budget, how these different programs fit in, what amount within the total amount is for each of these programs. And again, as Mike said, this is applied to fee categories 1 and 2 only. So over the course of this period, what we're looking at is an average of $8.6 million per year. And you can see that broken down on this pie chart for each of these programs. So notice that the dark blue transitional water costs and the light blue replenishment water costs make up the bulk of that budget. Those two things are contributing to an effort to increase surface water supply. The light green is MLRP, so that's a mix of demand reduction and increasing supply. The dark green is rotational land fallowing, which is a groundwater demand reduction effort. And then the small one, the pink or the violet color, is well mitigation. So again, that's responding to declining groundwater. So this next table here shows the rates plotted out across 3 planned phases. This also includes the category threshold that we were asked about earlier as well. So when you look at this table, you have the different categories starting with 0 at the bottom, going up to 3. You have the category description, and then you have the threshold for each. So notice category 0 is the first half acre foot per acre, right, in ET, in consumed groundwater. Going up, and then category 1 is from half an acre foot to 1.1, so on and so forth as you go up. You click it one more time. Let me thank you. One thing I want to point out, the first phase, which is the first year of the proposed fee program, the GSA is planning to charge the same rate for that category 3 use as is charged for category 2. The thinking here is that there's a lot of things in play. We have these tools that we've tried to develop to help people with this transition, but we're going to need a little time to roll those out and get people comfortable and understanding how these things are going to work. So that category 3 rate is not going to be charged in the first year. Starting in the second year with phase 2, that's when that higher category 3 rate of $317 would kick in. At this point, we intend to have these programs up and running, so there will be tools available to folks to transition into this. And lastly, the final change here is in phase 3, starting in 2028. So if you notice, the threshold between categories 2 and 3 starts out at 1.6 acre feet per acre in consumed groundwater use. That changes in 2028 to 1.4. Essentially, what's driving that change is the GSP, the demand reduction framework in the GSP. So we're going from what's initially a 10% reduction target, sub-basin water GSA-wide, to a 20% reduction target GSA-wide. So that category threshold shifts from 1.6 to 1.4. And that's again in the third phase there, starting in 2028.
So maybe add a little bit of perspective here. This is not water that you pump out of the ground. This is not the amount of water that is applied for irrigation purposes. This is ET, right? So those ET numbers are lower than the amount of water that you apply. And it's the amount of water use that's visible from space. The other thing is that the allocation is per irrigated parcel acre, not per field acre.
Per
right?
parcel acre general.
Per parcel acre, and our historical average per irrigated parcel acre has been about 1.8 feet in ET, okay? So that kind of gives you perspective of how that might fit in with the actual, the actual usage that you're applying. The average for an almond orchard in our area, the average ET is about 2.3 feet. Whereas the average that's physically put onto that orchard is probably closer to 3 to 3.4 feet, right? So you can understand that there's a difference there between how we're having to measure it, because using ET, we can measure it for everybody without having to go to individual parcels and put in meters. Yes, sir.
Okay, so if I'm on micros, the method of my delivery, I'm not wetting the whole acre. I'm wetting a specific area in the tree. How's that get allocated into acre? I mean, I'm not, you understand what I'm?
Right. So what's done is your allocation, that's the amount of water that you're allowed up to that reduction target, is applied per acre of parcel, okay? That's just applied, that's given to you, it's designated to you by the GSA. What we do is we use satellite data to measure what the ET is within the parcel, within the field acres. So we have the fields outlined from the satellite data, and we measure the ET from the plants in that field. So, and the ET doesn't care whether it's coming from micro drip, deep root irrigation, or impact sprinklers. It's just going to measure what comes up in terms of the plant crop consumptive use. One more question.
Can you repeat the first year chart? You said it was gonna be less.
Yeah, that first yellow circle on the left there, notice that this category 3 rate in that first year is the same as the category 2 rate.
Right.
Whereas starting in year 2, it kicks up to that, what we're calling the category 3 rate.
All right, thank you.
Of course. And again, that's to try to give some time to adapt and look at the pain for.
So the category 3 rate is category 1, 2, and 3 added together, right?
No, and so I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to make this as clear as I can, and I know this is a little complex, but once you kick up, into this rate, that's only applied to the groundwater above 1.6. So let's say you're pumping 1.8 acre feet per acre in consumed water, you're paying this rate on the 0.2 that exceeds the 1.6. For the first half acre foot, you're still paying nothing. For the next 0.6 acre feet, you're paying 57.81. So these rates apply to the water within the categories. Once you kick up to the higher rate, that higher rate is not applied to all the water you're using. Does that answer your question?
Just when you reach over that.
It's just for the amount that reaches over.
Got it. Yeah. So those rates are for per acre foot, not for that 0.6 or whatever. No,
Per acre foot in that
per
category.
acre foot, so you're not paying $57 for that category, whatever it is, 2 or 1.
You're paying the 57.81 on this 0.6 acre feet, 1.1 minus 0.5.
Times 0.6.
Yeah,
Right.
Times
Per-
your parcel acre.
per acre that it's.
Well, right.
Yeah.
If that's all the water you're using.
Yes, yeah.
But you're using 1.6, you're paying 138.
No, for this amount, you're still paying
Only
57.81. So again, if you're using 1.8 per acre, you're only paying this higher rate for the 0.2 that exceeds that 1.6.
What I'm getting at, you're not adding them all up.
Yeah.
It's just 138.
That's correct.
It's
You're not adding them all up.
in that category, yes.
138.
For that category, yes.
Per acre foot.
Per acre foot within that
So
category.
0.6 is not an acre foot, it's 0.6 is an acre foot, so
Yeah.
in that category 1,
Do
you're
an
paying
example.
57. Whatever.
So, you can go back to that, let me think of, well, can you go back to that before you go to this? Sorry.
Yes.
All right, so let's say that you're only farming 1 acre, okay? And you're putting 2 acre feet on that acre, okay? If that's the case, the first half acre foot will charge. Then 0.6 times 57.81. Then is that 0.6 or point? This is 0.5. 0.5 times 138.61 and 0.4 times 138.61.
So what would be the total?
We have an
I think,
example.
yeah,
slide.
can we look at?
We have an example slide there. So this is an example 60-acre ranch. Okay, it's outside the area, so nobody can recognize whose ranch it is. The parcel outline is in green. That's your irrigated parcel. That's what the acreage that you get your allocation for. The field acreage is in blue. That's where we measure ET. And so there, and your consumptive groundwater use, let's say that it's 2.3 feet of ET for each of those 50 acres. So you're using 1.9 acre feet per parcel acre, okay? Your allocation at the 10% reduction target is 1.6 times 60, that's 96. So you can see that you're using 115 acre feet, your allocation for category 1 and 2 is 96. And your actual groundwater pumping is 3.4, but that's an aside, okay? So what you've got here is from 0 to half a foot, you've got 60 parcel acres, so that's 30 acre feet, is your allocation. Let's see.
So there's no charge for that first 30 acre
No
feet.
charge for that first 30 acre feet.
Correct.
For the next 36 acre feet, you're paying 57.81. This is your allocation. For the next 30 acre feet, you're paying 138.61. And then for any pumping over 1.6 feet, which you're actually pumping 2.3 feet times 50 acres, that's 19 acre feet in excess of your allocation that you're pumping at 316.94.
That's after the second year,
Yeah, starting in year 2.
starting in year 2. That's not the first
So
year.
keep in mind, this is with no pumping reduction, okay? If you take advantage of programs where you fallow, like, let's say that your upper left parcel there is ready to come out, like orchard block is ready to come out, then you can either use that allocation and pump, for your decreased demand on your remaining parcel, or you can get paid to take it out and plant it in like a pollinator-friendly seed mix.
So about
So that will
$300
decrease your bill.
45.
How's that allocated to different crops, like pasture? There's
Doesn't matter what crop it is.
young trees.
And we don't care what the crop is, but some crops obviously have more ET than others, right? So if you're using, let's say, pistachios or grapes, your ET is gonna be a lot lower than it would be for almonds, right? So that's the grower's decision whether to do that, or if you're planting, like, let's say that you decide, well, I'm gonna take that upper left area, I'm just gonna take it out permanently, I'm just gonna use it for winter wheat, and I'm gonna graze cattle out there or something like that.
1-year-old trees or 2-year-old trees.
1 or 2-year-old trees, that the ET, the satellite data will sense that those trees have less ET.
Square foot of foliage is what it's.
Yeah, per square foot of foliage.
What about wetlands? Ground you had to leave out because it was, and fell under the endangered.
Okay, so we only count, the question was, what about wetlands or ground that you either choose not to farm or that you can't farm? Let's say you've got, rock tailings, or you've just got an area that you can't get to or that you choose not to get to. Those areas get outlined and you don't get charged anything on those areas. You do get an allocation for those areas. Yes?
When will the fees be collected in a year?
So part of that remains to be determined, but we are thinking that we're gonna send out a partial bill at the beginning of the year to people who intend to irrigate, and then we're gonna have a true-up bill after the end of the reporting season, which the reporting season goes from November 1st to October 31st. So probably toward the end of the year, the GSA will send out a bill that trues you up for that particular year.
So what if you have runoff into, say, that pasture on the northwest. Because you're irrigating a little bit too much, and that, say, 2 acres stay pretty green. That ET measurement is gonna actually count that runoff, isn't it?
So there's a couple of different things. The ET measurement will count anything that you see from space. Okay, if you get surface water delivery, you can self-report that and we will subtract it. If there is, let's say that there's natural rainwater runoff, so that it's just a wetter area, presumably you won't need to irrigate as much. But if there's something that, based on your knowledge of your operation, that ain't right, we have an appeals process where we'll work with you to make it right. I think that's the exception to the rule. Generally, it works pretty well. Yes, Tim.
I think he was asking if it runs into that green area, that's delineated out of the total already. So no ET will be attributed to it.
So are we talking about which area are we talking?
So
Are we talking
That
about-
right there.
yeah, my
This area
example,
here?
yeah, that's correct. No, northwest,
No, the other one, the one north up there, Mike.
northwest.
Up there?
Northwest, west side.
No,
To the left.
There, where the arrow, where the cursor is.
Oh, where the cursor is, okay. That area is not counted, period. Only the blue
Okay.
areas are
then
counted.
my next question is, how do you determine that?
That's determined based on satellite imagery and it's updated from year to year. And again, if we got it wrong, and you'll be able to see where it is on your account, on the groundwater accounting platform. If there's something that needs to be corrected, we'll work with you to correct.
Okay,
They're delineated by land IQ. the whole
Yes.
state.
yeah, I think there's some confusion there because I think it will be measured. Because if you had a pasture that you had some cattle on and it was 5 acres and you grow only almonds on your crop that you put down on your sheets, ET is still gonna measure that pasture because you're pumping that water.
The satellite measures it all.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
But what we do is we draw, or Land IQ draws lines around the fields. And the ET is only counted toward your account if it occurs within those fields. So you can have as much ET here or there or up there as you want. You can do whatever, it's not gonna get counted toward your bill.
but what my point is that if there is runoff or insufficiencies in your system, you're gonna get counted for it if you grow weeds or pasture on the edges. So it may be advisable to, chew things up a little bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, I mean, there's money involved and we're taking pictures from space to try to do this, so presumably it's gonna lead to better practices. But it's generally fairly easily implementable, and if there's corrections to be made, we've found in other areas that it's fairly straightforward to make those corrections.
Right.
Yes.
Because the Land IQ consider the different types of crop that you that generate the resources. If that field that they're talking about in sweet potato, it's still it'll be classified as and not.
Right, so you can, the question was, does Land IQ classify what crop
That's still considered irrigated ground, right?
If it's irrigated and it's a cultivated field, it's gonna be outlined and the ET is gonna be counted, period. Doesn't matter what your crop is. If it's designated as fallow by you or by us, then it's not counted.
Is there a crop coefficient? I think is what he's asking, right? Because you have ETO and ETC.
No.
That's different.
No. Yeah, it's actually based on actual.
Classified. So that you can, in other words, like you said, each field, you have something other than animals. Then it calculates ET or whatever, it's just whatever it's seen.
There's no crop coefficient used by this method. I mean, that's an alternative method. We also give you the alternative that if you don't like this and you want to use a meter, we give you the alternative to implement metering. Okay, and we'll work with you, we have rules and regulations as to how to use that we're planning to do.
Go back.
Yeah, go to 22, yeah, go ahead forward. Yeah. So next I wanted to talk specifically about this implementation process that's used for this type of fee. And this comes largely from Proposition 218, which many of you are probably somewhat familiar with. The first step is that a notice is mailed to all affected property owners. And that notice will contain a lot of information, a lot of what we're talking about today, what the proposed rates are, the basis of the fees. It will also give you some dates, some deadlines for later aspects of this process. Property owners will have two opportunities to respond to this. The one stems from that other thing at the top there, AB 2257. So the first opportunity is you can submit a written objection to the fee based on alleged non-compliance with Proposition 218. So this first one is not about whether you just support it or don't, it's about whether you think there's a compliance issue related to Proposition 218. The second opportunity is that you can submit a written protest to the fee for any reason, if you just don't support it. So within that notice, there will be a due date for written objections based on non-compliance. There'll be a date set where the board will reconvene to respond to any objections that are submitted. There'll also be a date on that notice for a public hearing or a protest hearing. And you have up until the public input portion of that hearing closes to submit written protests. The way this is calculated, the GSA board reconvenes to hold that hearing, and then we tabulate any submitted protests. Essentially, if the number of parcels for which a protest was submitted represents a majority, 50% plus, of affected parcels, then you have what's called a majority protest and the fee cannot be imposed. The way this works is it's one opportunity to protest per parcel. That comes from Proposition 218. So that's kind of the implementation process for how these fees work. If you don't have a majority protest take place, then the board can vote to adopt the fee program. As I said, all this will be laid out very cleanly in the notice that we're sending out. There'll be information that we've talked about today about the rates, and there'll be this entire process laid out clearly as well. General timeline here, we presented the draft fee study to the GSA board in November. We will be presenting the final fee study next week at the GSA board meeting. We are tentatively planning to mail those notices to affected property owners in early February, and then reconvening either in late March or early April to hold that protest hearing. The square on the bottom is that sometime between February and that protest hearing or public hearing, the board will reconvene to respond to any written objections stemming from non-compliance with Prop 218. We'll then come back in March or April and we'll tabulate any submitted protests. And then if the fee program is adopted, if it is successful, initial invoices may be sent out in May or June.
Ryan,
Yes,
the January 23rd should say 2025, February should say 2025.
I apologize. Thank you, Warren. So yes, starting with this one here, we are in 2025. Apologies for that. We're not going back in time.
What do you consider a parcel, a legal parcel?
An APN number.
100 acre parcel might be broke up into 20 acre parcels, and you're saying 1820, right?
So it's per Prop 218, it's a legal parcel, according to the assessor's lien rule data. And I realize there's maybe a discrepancy there because a larger parcel has the same vote as a smaller parcel. That is how Proposition 218 is written. That's how the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association set it out. Okay. So I think that's all I have as far as the fee structure. I know we'd like to present a bit about the groundwater accounting platform.
So, yeah, just a quick process check. If you came here for us to hear about the groundwater accounting platform and for us to work with you, then we want to offer that ability now. If you have any further questions, we want to hear them, and yes.
Fees we get on our tax bills now. What is that?
That is the operational assessment, so that pays for our monitoring, our reporting, the annual reporting of what the groundwater budgets are and forecasting to make sure that we're meeting all of the the different state compliance requirements, public outreach, what else is on? It's just our basic operational budget is included in that. And that's billed at either an irrigated rate or a non-irrigated rate. The non-irrigated rate is $1.54 per acre, I think, and the irrigated rate, I think, is $17.75 an acre. And if you have a parcel that you irrigate with surface water, where you don't want to, where you don't think you'll ever use groundwater, we can reclassify it as non-irrigated if that's something that folks are interested in.
Okay, in my case, I have in my deed, I don't use the water. I don't have a well on it, and I was charged the $17.75.
So you have the ability that if you don't have a well and you don't think that you will ever want to put in a well, then you have the ability to recategorize it. We have a policy for that we sent out with our initial bill. And we can, if you give us your name and contact information, we can walk you through that process so that if you want to reclassify, you don't have to keep paying that higher rate.
Last year was $5.50, this year was $17.75.
So 550 was because it was just for the last quarter of that year. Right, so the 1775 was for the whole year and it was sent out by the assessor's office. And if you want to reclassify, then you have to, there's a restrictive covenant that you have to sign that you're not going to use a well, and that covenant gets recorded. So if you do want to use a well in the future, then you would have to pay back taxes and then you'd be able to put in a well.
Also, another piece, repairing water, and we irrigate it.
Yes.
That's at $17 too.
Okay, the $17 is per acre. Okay.
Yeah, I know.
And if you're using surface, if you're using anything except groundwater and you don't intend to use groundwater, then you can reclassify to pay the $1.54. Okay. And if you're using riparian water with this groundwater use fee, then what you would do is you would report to us what riparian water you're using on that parcel, and it would be subtracted from your fee if you're using both riparian and groundwater.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just curious, during the freezing period of bloom and we're having to put water out there to save our trees, how much of that water you really don't need out there except for saving our trees? How much of that gets picked up?
It gets picked up. That's all I can tell you. It is, it doesn't matter if it's in winter and summer, if it's frost protection, pumping or irrigation, the ET is going to pick it up. And any ET is going to be a withdrawal from your account, and any rainwater affected precipitation is going to be a deposit. And usually, it would be I would not expect anybody having ET during the winter time that exceeds the rain deposits. Usually when your account goes into use is somewhere in the spring to early summer. Yes, sir.
If the fee gets approved, what month do you think the allocation process will start and the monitoring, the ET will start? June, July?
The monitoring is already ongoing, and we would use the monitoring that's being conducted now. Yeah, so it would go back to November 1st and account for all of the deposits via effective precipitation. So and you can check your account in the groundwater accounting platform. I don't know if that has November in it yet, but it will be updated as all those data become available. So shall we move on to the accounting platform?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I think Savannah's going to give us like an overview, and does that sound good to everybody? Would you like a brief explanation?
Yes.
Of what I did?
Yes.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah, okay, I'm gonna go over really quickly the groundwater accounting platform and the fee calculator that's in here. There is a handout in the back that has more steps. If you have not gotten your account set up or anything, that packet will give you the instructions on how to. So I'm just gonna jump us in as if you already set up your account. I just want to point out what we have when you're home on your homepage for a given water account is start on your water budget tab. And you can see that drop down up there for reporting period. There's currently 2 full years of ET data in here that you can use to get a sense of what your consumptive groundwater use has been. What you see here is
There's
the
24 and
total
25.
parcel acres, you can see the total field acres, and then you can see this count of total ET, total effective precip, and then ET minus effective precip. So I want to point out that if you don't get surface water, this ET minus effective precip is your estimate of consumed groundwater. So you can use that number either in acre feet per acre or in acre feet to get a sense of how much you're using relative to these fees or relative to how much you might want to change.
And the 2 years, the 2025 is forecasted?
No, we can't forecast forward,
But
but what you can do is, unless you've changed something pretty dramatic within your operation.
Where are the 2 years then, and what we could see?
The drop down, 2023 and 2020.
Where,
Or September
I'm only getting 24 and 25.
Okay, then sorry, it's 2024 and 2025. It's the reporting period is odd because it starts in 2024. Sorry, starts in 2023 and then ends in 2024. So the 2024 reporting period refers to November 1st of 2023.
So there's really just one. We don't
There's
have.
what, and then we have through October, I believe, in 2024. Is that right?
But it's, mine's the same.
It hasn't changed. Okay, well, we can look into that, but that should be, the 2024 reporting period should be starting from
What?
this November in 2024 through where we are right now. In 2025. So yes, 2023 is gonna be the 2024 reporting period is gonna be the year to use for an estimate. I just wanted to point out, again, this is something that Mike talked about, but the parcel outlines in the platform are blue. So you get allocation based on parcel acreage, and then you can see the field acreage and the field boundaries that are delineated by Land IQ in green on the platform. If you notice something is messed up with your field boundaries, please let us know. We can't change them, but we will send that back to Land IQ and they can make. What was that? Yes, in this case, these are just 2 screenshots that I used. You can toggle on your map in the platform to turn parcels on and off and fields on and off.
Get a notice and get us a.
Yes, so on this homepage, you can see which, oh, sorry, not in the notice for the Prop 218.
But you have access to this online.
Yeah.
And there will be an explanation of that in the notice, and someone to call if you need help.
Okay, so what I want to go into next is the fee calculator. So this is a tool that the GSA has developed so that you can look at what your estimated fees would be specifically for your water account. And there's also some options in this tool that allow you to do some scenario planning with the different programs that the GSA is starting to offer. One pro tip, if you right click and open this in a new tab, that's much easier than if you just click on it, because there isn't an easy way to get back to your account here. But what you'll see on the fee calculator is you're going to start your scenario. So most people have only one water account, and that'll just default to your water account. If you have more than one account, you can toggle between them here using that selector. The next thing is you're going to want to use the 2023 reporting period for baseline water use, or the 2024 reporting period for baseline water use. You can choose which year to use, but they should be fairly consistent unless you've taken significant land out of production or something has changed. And then what you have on this last bar here is the fee structure for 2025, and you can look at 2026, I believe. So this first year is going to give you a sense of what your fees would be if the fee is passed, and what it would look like through the end of 2025. Again, you can just kind of get your parcel or your account info as a summary there. And then you do need to tell us if you're receiving surface water to get an accurate count in this tool. At this point, what we're asking you to do is just estimate what your total delivery was and then a rough irrigation efficiency. ultimately what will be happening is there will be a form in the groundwater accounting platform for you to submit your actual surface water for the year. But this again is just a kind of quick and dirty estimate if you do have surface water to make sure that that's being accounted for.
Can you define what irrigation efficiency is?
Yes, this is really meant to be a way for us to take applied surface water and get down to how much of it is consumed. So if you're using drip irrigation, I think we have a 90 or 95% efficiency factor that we're using. The GSA does have a table of irrigation efficiency by irrigation method in the draft rules and regs. If you'd like to use that exact thing, but otherwise this is more of a general estimate. Okay, so once you've got your basically baseline information here that's going to calculate your total consumed groundwater, there is this option here where you can start to explore MLRP and fallowing options. So the way that this works is you're going to be able to enter any amount of acreage for each of these options that you're potentially interested in, and then the fee calculator will calculate your baseline scenario. So if you didn't do any of these land use changes versus however much acreage you want to put in here, it'll calculate for you both the water savings and then therefore the fee savings and also any incentive payments that you're getting. So this can get kind of complicated, but it's a really helpful tool for folks who are thinking about how these programs might impact them. I want to go over really quickly some of these summary tables because there's a lot of information. But every time that you run a scenario, you're going to get this baseline scenario all the way on the left. So you can see you've got total parcel acres for allocation versus total irrigated acres. When we take land out of production in any of these scenarios, it's going to change the total irrigated acres and therefore bring your total groundwater down. But your allocation acres, parcel acres aren't going to change unless you're in the MLRP program where you don't get the allocation for land that you put into that program. Then it's going to calculate for you your total consumed groundwater, both as an acre feet per parcel acre or acre feet per irrigated acre. It's just two different ways to look at it. And then it calculates your total allocation and your total usage. So down here, in that sort of bottom corner, you'll see the total ET, the total precip, and then any of that consumed surface water that you put in. And then it's going to calculate for you what your total annual consumed groundwater is in a baseline scenario. And then if you do put any of those land fallowing program options in from this page, the changes to your total usage, parcel allocation acres, irrigated acres, all that good stuff is going to be calculated in this blue box that shows you the land use change scenario. And then any savings and incentives will be calculated automatically for you as well. There's a second version of ways to look at all of this info, which is on the bottom. So what we were just looking at is that first tab, the summary tab. And then if you tab over to the 2025 phase 1 fee structure, this is going to break out for you, like that example that Ryan showed, how much of your total consumed groundwater is falling into each of these categories, and then how the fee is ultimately built up over time. So in this example, you can see, and I'll try to use the mouse, that you have a total allocation and a total amount of consumed groundwater, and you can see that for the first category, you pay nothing, but you used all of it. In the second category, you used all of the amount available. So your allocation was 445, your amount used was 445, therefore you have this total fee for category 1, and so on and so forth. And so if I was in this situation, I would be looking at, okay, I have 377 acre feet that are in category 3. So the most impactful way to bring the bill down is to try to reduce my usage by some amount of that category 3 water. And then you can see just the general totals and the fee structure down here in this table as well. Okay, so a couple examples here, just to highlight some of the differences in the programs to be aware of. If we go ahead and on that first page, we put in that we wanted to fallow 50 acres of land just on our own. then what you'd be able to see is the difference there between the baseline scenario and this land use change scenario of 50 acres of self-directed fallowing. So if it's self-directed, you can see in that sort of, that one, that your total parcel acres for allocation doesn't change when it's a self-directed fallowing, but you can see that the total irrigated acres comes down by 50 because that's how much I took out. And then it's going to estimate for you what the impact then is on your total ET. So again, you can see the allocation doesn't change in terms of acre feet because your allocation acres hasn't changed, but the ET or the usage of groundwater is going to go down pretty significantly because you took those 50 acres up. And then that is all summarized here in the savings and incentives. So in this case, when you're doing self-directed, you don't get an incentive payment, so there's no additional incentive, but your bill would come down by about $15,000. Wow. Okay. That, oops. Okay. Oh wait, sorry. There it is. I think I clicked too aggressively.
How far north does the east side irrigation, if you go, please?
Volunteer.
Does it follow me?
Yeah.
So TID is in the district too.
Well,
no,
no, TID is part of West Turlock.
Yeah, so there's a little corridor right along the main canal that is TID.
Yeah, right.
Victoria River though goes.
You're right.
We didn't set those boundaries. They set all the boundaries.
Okay, now that I'm equipped, I do want to run through one last example here just to highlight some of the differences in these programs. So if instead of doing just 50 acres of self-directed fallowing, I opted to do 50 acres fallowed through the MLRP program, then what we would see is that the total allocation acres is going to go down. So I don't retain the allocation for those 50 acres, but the irrigated acres also goes down. So you can see that my allocation, total allocation for that parcel or for this account is actually lower because I'm taking those parcel acres out. But my ET is also lower because I followed that land. And so what you see here is that you have a reduced fee total of $9,581. And that's less than if you've done self-directed fallowing, right? Because your allocation is lower. But then you also get this additional incentive payment of however many dollars per acre that this is per year of $42,500. So this is a significant savings, but then also you get this incentive payment against your bill. So those are just some of the examples of ways that you can use the fee calculator. I'll put this down. But if you have not gotten set up on the groundwater accounting platform, we're here to help you do that. And if you have any questions about changes you want to make in order to be able to use this tool, just let us know.
Well, I got on once.
Uh-huh.
The second time I tried to get on, it told me they don't exist.
Okay, well, I am happy to help you with that. Sometimes logins are the worst or some weird stuff happens, but.
Why don't you see if you can get questions from the group and then we can see if we can help individuals.
Are there any questions just about the calculator?
I need the help getting set up. I have actually two portions. And I need to convert, put them on the same account if I can, or I could have two different accounts like this.
Like, I can help you with that after this, but are there any general questions people have about this tool?
I have a question. Does Apple iPads, does it support the system or not?
It does, a little bit device.
I'm gonna try it on my phone.
Your phone would be way worse.
Oh, really?
Yes,
But it's an
because,
Android.
yes, but what it is it's not the app, it's the size of the screen. So they're designed for like laptop screens, it's a standard, and then the team is actually working on adjusting my iPad, but this for a bigger monitor is going to be